Okay, today we got a short session. We're going to try to work on Vlad's part for his Suzuki track bike. It's a spare part he has, Mark's part. We're waiting for the fuel tank to be sandblasted. And we do have the touch-up paint, and it was color right paint, so it matched perfectly. We have the decal. So this should be a relatively straightforward thing. But it's something, and I think it's a significant thing, that everybody that rides a sport bike from time to time scratches it up. And no one had to get rid of that scratch. Now that's a pretty deep, ugly scratch. No one had to get rid of it realistically and put a nice finish back on it. Even though this is a track bike, we're going to try to put relatively nice, smooth finish on it. The first step is I want to take a picture of this, so when I put the decals and the graphics back on, I get them exactly the way they were on the original part. I need to have a photo of this exactly how it is. Now most of the stickers on all of the motorcycles, if you want to take them off without scratching the paint, it's best just get a hair dryer. If you use a heat gun, sometimes you can burn the paint. Oh, this one's already peeling up. And peel them back. Don't rip it off. Peel it back nice and slow. You don't damage the paint underneath. Make more body work for yourself. There's two little separate decals here. I'm not sure these are going to be well, he's got these are Suzuki decals he got, so you know they'll be a perfect match. Now this one here will be a little bit different because we're into the paint where it's all got to be sanded down, so I'll do a good job of heating this one. And sometimes these can be a little annoying to get off because they come off in 100 little pieces, but sometimes they don't. What I wanted to show is when you get down to where that's, see, you can't paint over these stickers. It'll be a crappy job for sure if you try doing that. Once it's warm though, they seem to come pretty realistically anyway. Now here's what I knew that was going to happen. So now we've ground through the paint here, and let me explain what the issue. We're going to sand this piece. We're going to get this off somehow. Get it off. Here's what's going to happen is we're going to wind up with a spot where there's paint and there's an edge of no paint, and we're going to have to seal that. Otherwise, no matter how you paint this or prime it, that edge is always going to show through. So this is something that's a little more difficult than what you think it might be, but certainly not out of the realm of an average guy that's doing this work. It isn't like you need a machine shop or anything to do this, but you do need to be very careful about getting off all the old stickers. So that's the first step of this. Now the unfortunate part about this is the Suzuki emblem did not come off in one piece, so Vlad's going to have to get another one of these from Suzuki. That's not a big deal. But these are on with such tenacity, even with the heat, they come apart. So that's not much we can do about that. Now what happens, there's always a glue residue that stays on it. You can't paint over the glue residue. So no matter what, heating this up a certain amount, kind of just a common sense thing. If you can start rolling it back the way you take rubber cement off. If you've ever done those kind of graphics where in the old days we used to use rubber cement to do the graphics. And you can just peel this back. It eventually balls all up, as you can see. Now the next step on this is, as we do any refinishing thing, before we touch this with sandpaper, we want to get it as clean as possible. Even though this is a track bike, it could be that the guy that owned the bike before Vlad put 100 coats of carnauba wax on it. I don't know. And the last little bit will come off with prep so I'm not worried about that. But you can't paint over any of this glue, any of this stuff. First thing, this part has to be clean. Now again, the trick is before you put any sandpaper on anything, because if you put sandpaper over something that has silicone or carnauba wax on it, you wind up driving it down into the paint and you almost never get rid of the fish eyes. You just make yourself crazy later on. So the first step for me is always, I try to get this as clean, take a little Prepsol. If we had M600, that would, if you live in a place in the world where you can still buy M600, consider yourself lucky. That would be a whole lot better. Now we got quite a deep gouge here, so we're really going to have to do some work. And the idea here is I do not want to use Bondo. Bondo is going to crack, so I'm going to try to do most of this just by hand sanding with various grades of paper. Maybe starting with 220 and working down to about 600 or 1000, but to get this smooth first. Get rid of the gouges. If I start filling this with Bondo, and you're going to be riding along and a chunk comes out. I don't like, if possible, I try to never ever use Bondo. Not on flexible plastic parts. And good old Prepsol. Again, I'm trying to get into the scratches, get the whole part clean. Almost, well, not almost, a giant part of any painting job is the prep, up to the point you put the first paint on. If you don't do that the right way, it's like building a house with marshmallows instead of foundation bricks. All right, that's pretty much, I think that's clean enough to sand. Now we're going to start working on these big giant gouges. Okay, I'm using 220 to start with. The reason I don't want to use anything rougher than this, I don't want to impart any really deep scratches into this that I have to get out anyway. And I'd like to not have to fill anything. I'd like to do this all with sandpaper. A little more labor intensive than Bondo, where you just you trowel on a big chunk of Bondo and hope that a year later you don't hit a bump with the car and it bumps out. Anyway, this will be from 220, probably 400, then 600. I'll go right down the spectrum of paint with a hard block until I see that those scratches are out, and that's going to be a key thing. I want to get them out. Now, another thing, what happens here is, if you try to do this in 5 minutes, probably not going to be a high quality job. It's going to be a, I don't know what you would call it. But it just takes, as my dentist would say, good dental work takes time. I think it's his excuse to up the bill too. But anyway, I want to do as thorough of a sanding as I can. Now, to understand, these parts are all made of plastic. And plastic is a funny thing when it comes to matching paint to plastic. Any number of problems can come up, from fish eyes to parts melting. I call it melting. They craze. But nothing is going to stack the deck in your favor better than just doing a thorough cleaning. And then the last thing, I'll sand the whole part, get it etched, and get a coat of that primer sealer that we've been using. That Duplicolor primer sealer seems to work real good on plastic. And then we'll see how these parts are going to play out. We only have one part here, but now just to see halfway through the sanding, you can see everything but the deepest of the gouges. You can see the deep ones. It's just going to require a lot more work. Now, if you go and take rougher sandpaper, you're going to put deeper gouges in. See where I've sanded it? I don't have real deep gouges, and I've got a pretty nice blend, but I'm just going to have to work that area for 10-15 minutes or whatever, maybe even have a cup of coffee, but get that. I want to do it all without Bondo. Even though this is a track bike, I'd like to keep the paint quality nice. I'm down to the last step on this. I want to just scuff everything up with, and by the way, that did come out pretty decent. I want to scuff the whole part, radius all the edges. Make sure we don't have any sharp edges. Now this way, the way that I do this, if we did have a chunk that I really couldn't sand out, I would fill it with CA. I would spend the extra money and buy a bottle of thick CA, and I'm about out of it right now, so I'd have to go get a jar. But this didn't need anything, which means there's almost no chance that paint is going to be a problem. And anytime you Bondo something, I always think it's a very short It's never a forever thing. And all you have to do is go to one of the cruise nights here and look at some of the cars that have been painted with Bondo and see what they look like a year or two later. Especially if they get driven and used, and I'm sure in this case this track bike is going to take a beating. Anyway, we are pretty much ready. Once I do the final, make sure I have no shiny spots on this. This is going to be ready for, let me just show this up close. And any time you drop the bike, you scuff it, you scratch it, this is the way I would go about fixing it. And that's pretty much ready for our primer sealer. Now we always have several different kinds of primer and sealer and everything around. And I try to be selective about, for this particular part, a plastic part, this is going to be my first choice because it's a sealer. It'll hopefully seal that edge where the prime ends and the paint begins, where the raw plastic. Now, here's what I would say. If on metal, I like self-etching primer. This works on plastic too, but we found that this is just a little bit better for these plastic parts that seem to have these issues with exactly where the paint ends is where there'll be a problem. Now another thing, because I know this won't be a problem on this part, we have Color-Right paint. Color-Right, Vlad paid the price to get Color-Right paint for this bike. And I think between having this part prepped and the primer, the Color-Right paint, the end result, it's going to be the equivalent of having a brand new part. Now I pretty much keep any of the extra paint for touch-ups because, you know, especially this is a track bike. And we do have enough paint, of course, to paint this part, and maybe, well, hopefully we're not going to scratch anything up. But this color in particular, you've got to shake, shake, shake until the bottom of this jar turns the color of the paint. And sometimes that can take 2 or 3 minutes because this paint, here it's coming through, this paint has so much metallic and pearl in it. And it's a beautiful color blue, like the R1. It has just a dramatic bright blue. But here it's coming through. If you don't do this, the color's not going to match. And that's as simple as that. You're just going to have a part that the color doesn't match. So we'll just shake, shake until that whole bottom looks just like that. And if you don't do that, and again, you risk that the part is not going to match exactly. Well, what a beautiful color this is in the sun. Suzuki got this one right. So now we're into the routine where what we're going to have to do is 20 minutes apart, three coats, and then the clear. Now we have 2 choices. We could put the stickers on the outside of the clear, but probably it would be better off if I let this dry. Probably be a little nicer job. I'll put the stickers under the clear, and then the only thing when Vlad gets that little chrome Suzuki thing, he can just tack that on. I think that's going to look just really nice from every angle. That really does look good. Now what I decided to do here, because this took a lot longer than I thought it would. Not going to get the clear on or the decals today. I'll save that for the next work session. But this paint has dried up beautifully. And here's the issue. I was thinking, I don't know if putting the decals over paint that's only an hour old is the smartest thing in the world to do. But I know if I let this dry overnight, I've stacked the deck in my favor. So I'm going to stack the deck in my favor. Do the decals and the clear tomorrow or whenever. And there's also a big storm coming in too, as if we didn't have enough exciting stuff going on. And by the way, just something I've come in 50 years, I've come to realize actually it's more than 50 years of painting things, including guitars and boats and refinishing Chris Crafts and painting my own air coupe and whatever. Had a lot of experience with paint, and there's a general rule, and it applies today. If in doubt, wait it out. You run into more problems when you try to rush a paint job, try to put the tape on before the paint's dry. I don't know about the decals, but I don't want to risk this. Anyway, if in doubt, wait it out. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video, and we'll finish this hopefully in the next work session. And then Vlad will be ready to pick up his stuff. Well, I bet he's going to be happy to see all this.